Awareness is the first step, the foundation upon which every act of mastery must be built. Without awareness, we wander through life as if sleepwalking, believing that our thoughts are truths and that our reactions are dictated by reality itself. Yet, reality is neutral. It is the mind that colors it, shapes it, twists it. Every fear, every regret, every anxiety, every fleeting joy is first filtered through the lens of consciousness or the lack thereof. To awaken to awareness is to recognize that your mind is constantly speaking, constantly pulling you in directions you may not consciously choose. It is the first act of reclaiming sovereignty over your own experience, a quiet but powerful rebellion against the tyranny of unconscious thought. Most people live as though their minds are separate from themselves, as though they are passengers rather than pilots. They react automatically to situations, believing that every emotion and every urge is something they must obey. They do not notice the subtle cues of their own inner world, the tension in their shoulders, the shallow rhythm of their breathing, the flickering emotions that rise like tides without warning. Awareness begins with noticing these small things, for the small things are the doorway to understanding the larger patterns. Every thought that rises without examination is a thread in a tapestry woven by habit, conditioning, and past experience. To become aware is to pull one thread at a time and see the design clearly, without judgment, without resistance, simply with observation. True awareness requires honesty. It is not a superficial noticing of the world around you or a casual acknowledgement of your thoughts. It is a deep, unflinching recognition of what is happening within you at every moment. When you feel irritation, do you blame the outside world, or do you notice the exact sensation that arises in your body? When worry creeps in, do you chase it with solutions, or do you sit with it long enough to see how it forms, how it ebbs, how it functions in your life? Awareness is the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, and crossing it requires courage. It demands that you stop hiding behind business, behind distractions, behind the comforting illusion that you are in control, when in reality you are often being led by habits you barely recognize. The mind is a powerful instrument, but like any instrument, it must be tuned. When you are unaware, it plays itself, striking notes of fear, longing, attachment, and judgment without your permission. When you are aware, you hear those notes clearly, you recognize their patterns, and you can choose which melodies to amplify and which to silence. Awareness allows you to witness the mind's tendencies, how it dwells on what is lost, how it anticipates what may never come, how it spins endless narratives of self-doubt. In that witnessing, there is freedom. You realize that thoughts are not commands and emotions are not mandates. They are signals, pieces of data, fleeting experiences passing through your consciousness. The moment you label them merely as signals rather than truths is the moment you step out of the mind's automatic dominance and into a space of conscious choice. Yet awareness is not a single act, it is a practice, a cultivation. Just as the body grows stronger with repeated effort, the mind becomes more observant and discerning with repeated awareness. It begins with simple moments, pausing to notice your breath, observing the tension in your jaw, recognizing when your attention has drifted to worries about the future or regrets about the past. These moments, small as they seem, are powerful seeds. With patience, they grow into a steady capacity to notice when the mind is pulling you away from presence, to catch yourself before you act impulsively, to see the layers of thought before you are swept away by them. Awareness, therefore, is not passive. It is active attention, a vigilant yet gentle observation of the self in motion. One of the most profound effects of awareness is the space it creates between stimulus and response. In everyday life, without awareness, we react as though the world is attacking us, or as though our emotions are dictates that must be obeyed. We argue, we lash out, we crumble, we chase fleeting pleasures, all under the illusion that we are acting freely. Awareness interrupts that cycle. It is the recognition that in every situation there is a choice, and that choice is born not from reflex but from conscious seeing. By noticing the mind's impulses before they dictate your behavior, you regain authority over your actions. You begin to respond to life rather than simply react to it. This practice of awareness also deepens the quality of every experience. Life, when observed consciously, is no longer a series of distractions and obligations. Each moment becomes vivid, textured, and meaningful. The sound of a bird, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, the tone of a conversation. All these experiences gain clarity when your mind is present to witness them. Awareness turns ordinary experiences into profound teachers, and each observation becomes a mirror reflecting the workings of your own consciousness. You start to understand yourself not as a passive passenger of circumstance, but as an active participant in the creation of your inner life. The path of awareness is not without resistance. The mind resists noticing itself because it fears being exposed, fears losing control, fears being seen as chaotic or flawed. Every moment of distraction, every urge to escape into entertainment, worry or fantasy is a subtle rebellion against this noticing. Yet, it is precisely through persistent awareness that these resistances are softened. By gently returning to the present, by observing without judgment, by noticing even the act of distraction itself, you train the mind to yield its tyranny. The more you notice, the less you are pulled unconsciously, and the more you experience the quiet power of self-mastery that arises simply from knowing the contents of your own mind. Awareness, therefore, is not just the first step, it is the doorway to freedom. It is the lens through which all mastery must be seen. To cultivate awareness is to cultivate life itself, moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath. It is the realization that the mind, though wild and restless, can be understood, guided, and ultimately embraced as a loyal servant rather than a demanding master. Each time you notice, each time you pause, each time you choose to observe rather than react, you strengthen the bridge between unconscious impulse and conscious choice, between chaos and clarity, between a life led by distraction and a life lived intentionally. The danger of mental autopilot is one of the most insidious threats to living a conscious, empowered life. It is quiet, subtle, and almost invisible until its effects are undeniable. Most people move through their days without noticing that they are no longer present, that their thoughts are running them, that their habits dictate actions far more than conscious choice ever does. Mental autopilot is the unconscious mode of existence, the state in which the mind repeats patterns without awareness, replaying old fears, old judgments, old desires, and old grievances as though they were commands to be obeyed. The danger is that in this state, the mind is free to control your emotions, your reactions, and your behaviors while you believe you are free. You do not notice that you are being led by invisible strings, that your habits have taken the steering wheel, and that the driver you think is you is merely an observer, seated quietly in the passenger seat. When you operate on autopilot, the present moment becomes a blur. Days, weeks, months, and even years slip by, marked only by the repetition of routine, by mechanical decisions, by reactions dictated by conditioning rather than conscious thought. Your mind constantly replays old narratives. The voice of doubt whispering that you are not enough, the fear of the future warning that something bad is inevitable, the memory of past pain convincing you to protect yourself in ways that no longer serve you. These patterns, repeated endlessly, become a prison. You may not realize it at first, because autopilot often masquerades as efficiency. I'm just getting things done, you tell yourself. I don't have time to think about how I feel. Yet efficiency without awareness is a life half lived, and the cost is the surrender of freedom. Autopilot strips life of its depth. The small, quiet joys, the subtle details of a conversation, the shifting colors of the sky, the resonance of music, the texture of a meal. These slip past unnoticed because your attention is elsewhere, absorbed in habitual thought or future planning or replaying past events. You are physically present, yet your mind is absent. Emotional experiences become dulled because they are filtered through unconscious patterns rather than being experienced directly. This absence of presence can make life feel heavy, repetitive, and unsatisfying even when external circumstances appear favorable. The danger is not only that you lose moments, it is that you lose yourself, the core of who you are, in the haze of habitual thought and unexamined emotion. Mental autopilot also heightens the risk of reactive living. When you are not conscious of your thoughts, you are more likely to respond impulsively, to be carried away by fear, anger, desire, or resentment. A small inconvenience can trigger an outsized reaction, a passing comment can provoke a deep emotional spiral, a fleeting anxiety can become a persistent shadow. Autopilot amplifies the mind's tendency to dramatize, exaggerate, and misinterpret reality. Without awareness, you react as though every event is of the utmost importance, as though every thought carries truth, and as though every emotion demands immediate action. This reactive mode creates patterns of stress, conflict, and dissatisfaction, and it distances you from the ability to respond thoughtfully and intentionally to the world around you. The autopilot mind also thrives on repetition. Habits, routines, and conditioned behaviors are convenient, but convenience is deceptive. The mind prefers patterns because they reduce effort, but these patterns often no longer serve your growth. You may continue arguments, repeat old mistakes, hold grudges, or avoid challenges simply because the mind has grown comfortable in repetition. In this state, awareness is absent and learning is limited. You believe you are making decisions, but most of your choices are automatic. The danger is that the autopilot mode becomes your default existence, and without deliberate interruption, it guides you into cycles that reinforce fear, limitation, and stagnation. Autopilot also diminishes creativity and intuition. When the mind is operating mechanically, it is less capable of noticing novel solutions, subtle patterns, or deeper truths. Creativity requires presence, curiosity, and observation. Intuition requires listening to the whispers of the mind and body that are often drowned out by the chatter of habitual thought. Autopilot muffles these subtle voices, leaving only noise and routine. When your mind is not fully awake, the richness of life, the possibilities, the unexpected insights, the beauty of simplicity remains hidden, and your potential goes unrecognized. Escaping autopilot requires deliberate effort and consistent practice. Awareness is the antidote, but it is not a one-time act. It is a daily cultivation. It begins with noticing when your attention drifts, when your actions feel automatic, when your mind is repeating the same loops without question. These moments of noticing, as small as they may seem, are cracks in the wall of habit. Through observation, the autopilot mode can be interrupted and choice can re-enter the equation. Simple practices such as mindful breathing, pausing before reacting, reflecting on habitual responses, and observing the present moment without judgment slowly weaken the grip of unconscious patterns. Over time, the mind learns that presence is possible, that conscious attention can direct thought and action, and that life can be experienced rather than endured. Another aspect of autopilot is its insidious impact on relationships. When the mind operates unconsciously, communication becomes mechanical, listening becomes distracted, and empathy diminishes. You may hear words without understanding meaning, react without considering context, or respond without awareness of the other person's state. Relationships suffer because the autopilot mind prioritizes habitual reactions over conscious connection. Emotional distance grows silently, subtly, yet steadily, and the richness of human connection fades. Awareness restores not only personal clarity, but also relational depth, enabling you to engage authentically, respond thoughtfully, and nurture meaningful bonds. Autopilot also magnifies internal conflict. The unconscious mind acts according to deeply ingrained patterns, many of which conflict with conscious goals or values. You may strive for peace, yet constantly feed anxiety, desire freedom, yet repeat habits of restriction, seek clarity, yet cling to confusion. Autopilot enforces this contradiction, keeping you caught between intention and action, between aspiration and routine. Awareness illuminates these conflicts. It brings the unconscious into dialogue with the conscious, exposing inconsistencies and creating the possibility for alignment. The danger of mental autopilot is subtle but pervasive. It steals life quietly, moment by moment, thought by thought. It convinces you that automatic reactions are necessary, that habitual thought is normal, that distraction is acceptable. Yet each moment spent in autopilot is a moment surrendered to the mind's unconscious rules, a moment where you are not fully present to yourself or your life. Breaking free requires vigilance, patience, and persistent noticing, a willingness to observe without judgment and to reclaim authority over thought, emotion, and action. The more consistent the practice, the more the mind becomes a conscious partner rather than a hidden driver, and the more life unfolds with clarity, choice, and presence. Presence unlocks clarity in a way that nothing else can. It is the bridge between scattered thoughts and focused understanding, between distraction and insight, between noise and the quiet resonance of truth. Most people live fragmented lives, their attention divided across countless tasks, worries, and distractions. The mind flits from thought to thought, from memory to anticipation, rarely settling long enough to see what is truly happening. In this state, confusion thrives. Decisions feel heavy, emotions feel overwhelming, and life feels like a constant push against unseen currents. Presence, in its simplicity, clears this fog. To be present is to anchor yourself in the now, to engage fully with the moment at hand, and to witness the reality of your experience without distortion. Clarity emerges naturally when the mind is grounded in presence, because presence removes the interference of incessant chatter. Thoughts of the past, regrets, grudges, or mistakes occupy the mind, creating layers of distortion. Thoughts of the future, worries, plans, and hypothetical scenarios create tension and anticipation. Both pull attention away from what is, and both obscure the truth that exists only in the current moment. When you cultivate presence, these layers peel back. You notice reality as it is, not as it was, not as it might be, but as it is. The sound of your own breath, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the sensation of your body in space, the immediate environment, all these details become vivid and undeniable. In this vividness lies clarity. Presence allows observation without attachment. When you are fully present, you are able to notice thoughts, emotions, and sensations as they arise without immediately identifying with them or reacting to them. The mind is no longer a chaotic storm of impulses. It becomes a field of phenomena to be observed and understood. Each thought can be seen for what it truly is, a passing mental event, not a mandate, not a judgment, not a truth. Each emotion can be felt without being controlled by it. The clarity that arises from this observation is profound because it separates perception from reaction. In moments of presence, insight flows easily because the mind is not clouded by habitual interpretations or unconscious bias. Presence also illuminates priorities. When attention is scattered, it is nearly impossible to see what truly matters. Time is wasted on trivialities, energy is spent on inconsequential worries, and decisions are made from confusion rather than understanding. Presence sharpens awareness, allowing you to perceive the weight and relevance of each situation with honesty. When the mind is grounded in the now, you naturally recognize what deserves attention, what deserves action, and what deserves letting go. The clarity that arises from this discernment is not a fleeting insight, it is a stable orientation of consciousness that guides thought, emotion, and behavior in alignment with purpose rather than distraction. Another aspect of clarity through presence is emotional intelligence. When the mind is grounded in the moment, it is better able to perceive the subtleties of emotion, both your own and those of others. Emotional reactions no longer overwhelm judgment because they are observed with conscious attention. You see the difference between instinctive reaction and thoughtful response. You notice the influence of past experiences on present perceptions and can choose to act differently. Presence reveals the nuances that autopilot thinking obscures. You begin to understand the patterns of thought and behavior, to predict the outcomes of action with greater accuracy, and to engage with life with a sense of composure, an insight that feels effortless yet profoundly powerful. Clarity is also amplified in decision-making when presence is cultivated. Decisions made in a state of autopilot or distraction are often reactive, biased, or influenced by habit rather than conscious consideration. Presence slows the mind just enough to notice the underlying factors of any situation. You can see cause and effect with precision. Options become clear, consequences become visible, and your inner wisdom can guide choices rather than the habitual mind or emotional impulse. In the calm of the present, the complexity of life is revealed in manageable pieces, and you are able to navigate challenges with insight rather than anxiety. Presence also nurtures creativity. When the mind is scattered or overwhelmed, inspiration is buried beneath noise. When it is fully engaged in the moment, it becomes receptive to subtle patterns, to connections that are normally invisible, and to insights that appear almost spontaneously. Creativity is not forced, it arises naturally when awareness is anchored in reality. The mind, free from distraction, can explore possibilities, solve problems, and innovate in ways that feel fluid and effortless. Clarity and creativity are inseparable companions because clarity provides the space for new ideas to emerge without distortion. Furthermore, presence strengthens resilience. Life constantly presents challenges, uncertainties, and discomfort. When the mind is not present, these moments are magnified, amplified by projections, regrets, and worries. But when you are present, challenges are met with composure because you are perceiving them as they truly are, not as imagined threats or exaggerated obstacles. Presence creates a buffer, a space in which clarity operates. You can respond effectively, prioritize solutions, and engage with difficulty without being swept away by mental chaos. The clarity that arises from presence is a stabilizing force, a steady anchor in the turbulence of life. Presence also enhances relationships. When you are fully engaged in a conversation, fully attentive to another person, you perceive subtleties that autopilot thinking misses. Tone, gesture, emotion, and intent become visible. Misunderstandings diminish because the mind is not clouded by distraction, assumptions, or habitual judgment. Presence creates a clarity that deepens connection, allowing for authentic engagement and mutual understanding. People sense when attention is given fully, and this awareness strengthens trust, intimacy, and empathy. Finally, presence aligns action with values. Life often feels chaotic because actions are taken in response to impulse or habit rather than conscious intention. When grounded in presence, decisions, behavior, and choices are informed by awareness of what truly matters. Life becomes coherent because thought, emotion, and action are integrated. Clarity emerges not only as understanding but as alignment, an internal order that reflects conscious mastery rather than passive drifting. Each step taken in awareness reinforces clarity, and the cumulative effect transforms the experience of living from confusion to insight. Thoughts are not you. This statement may seem simple, almost obvious, yet for most people it is revolutionary. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to identify with our thoughts, to assume that every idea, judgment, worry, or fantasy is a reflection of who we are at our core. We are told to think before you act, to listen to your mind, to rely on reason and logic as if the mind were infallible. And so we grow up believing that our thoughts define us, that they are our identity, our authority, our truth. Yet nothing could be further from reality. Thoughts are tools. They are messages. They are passing phenomena of consciousness, but they are not the self. They are events in the mind, not the essence of being. Understanding this distinction is a cornerstone of mastery, a key that unlocks freedom from the chains of mental tyranny. The mind is extraordinarily active. It generates an endless stream of thoughts, some relevant, some trivial, some helpful, some harmful. A single day may produce tens of thousands of these mental events, each vying for attention, each carrying the weight of seeming importance. When we fail to distinguish ourselves from these thoughts, we react as though each one were a command. Anxiety arises because a fleeting worry is treated as truth. Anger escalates because a passing judgment is treated as reality. Doubt clouds action because a momentary hesitation is mistaken for inadequacy. To identify with every thought is to surrender authority over life to a ceaseless inner commentary that is often inaccurate, repetitive, and ungrounded. Recognizing that thoughts are not you begins with observation. Awareness allows you to see them as clouds passing across the sky of consciousness, as waves rising and falling in a vast ocean. A thought may arise, a fear, a desire, a memory, a judgment. You notice it without labeling it as you, without acting on it immediately, without accepting it as fact. The simple act of noticing creates a distance between the observer and the observed. This distance is profound because it is in this space that freedom is born. The mind can no longer dictate emotions and actions without conscious choice because you have claimed the role of witness, the role of awareness itself. When you recognize that thoughts are not you, the emotional charge they carry begins to dissipate. A thought about failure is no longer a prophecy of doom, but a passing event that can be examined and evaluated. A judgment about another person is no longer a reflection of moral authority, but a signal of perception influenced by experience and bias. A craving or desire is no longer a command to be obeyed, but a signal to be noticed and considered. Emotions follow thought, and when thought is seen clearly as separate from the self, emotional reactions become conscious, deliberate, and measured. You gain the ability to respond rather than react, to engage rather than be swept away, and to act in alignment with deeper values rather than impulsive impulses. Thoughts also often carry the weight of habit. From early life, the mind learns patterns, repeating the same loops of fear, doubt, longing, and judgment. When we fail to see that thoughts are not the self, these patterns become unquestioned truths, repeated endlessly, dictating the flow of life. The habitual mind convinces us of necessity. You must feel this way. You must think this way. This is who you are. Yet every thought is transient, impermanent, and often conditioned by forces outside conscious awareness. Recognizing their separateness from the self allows these patterns to be disrupted, observed, and consciously chosen. You begin to see that old beliefs and automatic judgments are not destiny. They are options, malleable, changeable, and subject to awareness. The distinction between self And thought also opens the door to inner peace. Much of human suffering arises from identification with thought, dwelling on what has happened, worrying about what may happen, or judging oneself harshly for what is. These thoughts create cycles of pain, loops of tension, and endless mental chatter. When thoughts are seen as passing events, the mind becomes a stage upon which experiences play out rather than a prison in which you are trapped. You remain grounded, steady, and calm, even as mental activity continues. The recognition that you are the observer, the awareness itself, allows clarity to emerge. Your identity shifts from being a participant in every mental drama to being the conscious witness, the silent presence that notices without being dominated. Thoughts are also deceptive in their appearance of control. They insist upon attention, demanding to be followed, evaluated, or acted upon. When we mistake them for the self, we give away our power. Every reaction to a thought reinforces the illusion that the mind is authority, that it knows what is best, that it directs life with accuracy. Yet the mind is limited, biased, and influenced by countless unseen factors, emotions, memories, social conditioning, and chemical states. Freedom arises when thoughts are acknowledged as events rather than truths, as suggestions rather than mandates. You reclaim the driver's seat, steering consciously rather than being carried by the momentum of mental activity. Practicing the recognition that thoughts are not you requires patience and consistency. Meditation, reflection, journaling, and mindful observation are tools to cultivate this awareness. The goal is not to suppress thought or eliminate it, but to develop the skill of seeing it clearly without identification. You notice how a thought arises, how it evolves, and how it passes away. You notice its emotional coloring, its habitual patterns, and its underlying assumptions. And most importantly, you notice that none of this activity changes the essence of who you are. You remain the conscious presence observing the mind, the space in which thoughts appear, shift, and dissolve. This understanding transforms not only inner life but outer life as well. Decisions become clearer because they are based on observation and discernment rather than reactive thought. Relationships improve because judgments and assumptions are tempered by awareness. Stress diminishes because worry and fear no longer control the narrative. Actions become intentional rather than automatic, grounded in clarity rather than distraction. Each moment of noticing reinforces the separation between thought and self, strengthening the capacity to act with mastery, calm, and insight. Emotion follows attention. This principle is simple in its phrasing, yet profound in its implications. The mind is constantly responding to whatever it focuses on. Where attention goes, energy flows, and with energy comes feeling. If attention is scattered, if it is absorbed in fear, regret, or longing, emotions become chaotic, unpredictable, and reactive. If attention is intentional, grounded in awareness and presence, emotions align naturally with clarity, calm, and constructive action. Understanding this truth is a cornerstone of self-mastery because it reveals that the quality of emotional life is not controlled by circumstances, people, or events. It is controlled by the direction and focus of attention. Most people live with attention scattered, flitting from one thought to another, one worry to the next, one craving to the next. They attend to every distraction, dwell on imagined fears, or replay old grievances. In doing so, they allow their emotional state to be dictated by mental clutter rather than conscious choice. Anxiety blooms in the mind, absorbed by worst-case scenarios. Frustration rises when attention is fixed on past mistakes. Despair deepens when focus is stuck on what is lacking. The mind is a powerful amplifier, and whatever it latches onto is magnified. When attention is unconscious, emotion becomes unpredictable, reactive, and exhausting, leaving the individual at the mercy of circumstances beyond their control. The practice of mastering attention transforms the emotional landscape. By choosing where to place focus, a person begins to direct the mind rather than be directed by it. Attention acts as a lens. It magnifies certain experiences, clarifies others, and allows irrelevant distractions to fade into the background. When attention is intentionally directed toward what is present, what is true, and what is constructive, the resulting emotions are coherent and stable. Calmness, confidence, joy, and clarity arise naturally when attention is anchored, because the mind is no longer feeding itself illusions, anxieties, or unnecessary drama. Emotion following attention is evident in every aspect of life. Consider the same event experienced by two different people. One person dwells on what could go wrong, scanning for threats and potential pitfalls, focusing on failure, uncertainty, or perceived injustices. Their emotions are tense, reactive, and fearful. Another person attends to the opportunity, the lesson, or the resources available. Their emotions are calm, confident, and engaged. The event itself has not changed. What differs is the focus of attention. Emotion flows in alignment with attention, not circumstance, not logic, not moral judgment, and not social expectation. This insight reveals the profound responsibility of attention. It is the unseen architect of emotional reality. Cultivating mastery of attention begins with awareness. You cannot choose where to direct attention if you are unaware of where it currently lies. The first step is noticing the habitual pool of thought, the wandering mind, the distractions, the unconscious loops. Awareness is a gentle, patient observation of where attention drifts, how it is captured by worry, desire, or judgment, and the emotional states that follow. This noticing is itself an act of power because it interrupts the unconscious cycle. Attention, once noticed, can be reclaimed and directed consciously. The next stage is deliberate focus. Attention is like a muscle. It strengthens with practice and weakens with neglect. Moments of conscious focus, even brief, accumulate over time. When attention is directed intentionally, emotions stabilize and become reliable. This does not mean ignoring reality or suppressing feelings. Rather, it means choosing where to place awareness so that emotional life is responsive rather than reactive. For example, focusing on breath, sensation, or immediate action grounds attention in the present moment, reducing anxiety, reactivity, and rumination. Focusing on values, intention, and purpose aligns emotion with meaningful action. Emotion following attention also clarifies priorities. When the mind is scattered across trivialities, emotional energy is dispersed, leading to fatigue, irritation, and dissatisfaction. By directing attention to what truly matters, emotions follow suit, energizing action and deepening engagement with life. A focused mind creates a focused emotional experience. Happiness, contentment, and motivation emerge when attention is directed toward constructive experiences, relationships, and growth. Conversely, attention directed toward negativity, gossip, or comparison produces emotions that drain energy, distort perception, and create unnecessary suffering. This principle also empowers relationships. The emotions we bring to interactions are determined by where our attention is placed. Listening attentively, noticing the other person's presence, and focusing on understanding generates emotions of empathy, patience, and connection. Conversely, distracted attention leads to irritation, misunderstanding, or detachment. By mastering attention, we influence not only our own emotional state, but also the emotional environment around us. Presence becomes a stabilizing force, and emotions become a conduit for clarity, authenticity, and connection. The link between attention and emotion also illuminates the nature of internal dialogue. Many people are unaware that they are continuously attending to thoughts that provoke stress, fear, or frustration. The mind rehearses, imagines scenarios, criticizes, or obsesses over outcomes. Attention directed to these thoughts creates an emotional state as real as any external event. By noticing this mechanism, a person can shift attention from the story to awareness itself, from distraction to presence, from chaos to calm. Emotional regulation is not about suppression. It is about conscious allocation of attention. Furthermore, attention shapes the energy with which life is experienced. Focused attention creates vitality, engagement, and joy. Scattered attention creates fatigue, tension, and a sense of life slipping by. The mind amplifies what is attended to when attention is deliberately placed on meaningful work, on beauty, on gratitude, or on solution-oriented thinking. Emotion aligns accordingly. The result is a life that feels alive, rich, and coherent rather than fragmented and reactive. Mastering attention is a daily practice. Small moments accumulate. Pausing to notice the direction of thought, observing where the mind drifts, and gently bringing it back to the present or to a chosen focus strengthens the mind's capacity to direct emotion. Over time, this practice transforms the inner landscape. Emotions become reliable indicators of attention, feedback for where energy is directed, and tools for conscious engagement rather than unpredictable forces controlling behavior. Understanding that emotion follows attention is liberating. It shifts responsibility inward, away from external circumstances, events, or other people. It empowers the individual to reclaim authority over mental and emotional life. By consistently cultivating awareness and choosing where to direct attention, one learns to generate calm, focus, joy, and resilience at will. Emotional life is no longer a roller coaster dictated by wandering thoughts or external chaos. Instead, it becomes a natural reflection of conscious focus, an elegant response to deliberate observation, and a manifestation of mastery over the mind. Consistency builds mastery. This principle is deceptively simple, yet it holds the key to transforming potential into reality. Mastery is not born of one extraordinary effort, one moment of insight, or one grand decision. It is forged slowly, quietly, and persistently through repeated practice, through the daily commitment to observe, to choose, to act with awareness. Every moment of deliberate attention, every pause to notice thought, every conscious choice in the face of habit is a brick laid in the foundation of mastery. Without consistency, even the sharpest insight or the deepest understanding fades quickly, like a footprint washed away by waves. But when actions, awareness, and intention are applied repeatedly, mastery emerges not suddenly, but inevitably. The mind is powerful but also lazy. Without repeated practice, it falls back into familiar patterns, habits, and automatic responses. A single moment of awareness does not permanently change the mind, just as a single workout does not transform the body. Mastery requires endurance, a willingness to show up day after day, moment after moment, to notice where attention drifts, to correct the course, and to re-anchor in presence. It is in this repetition that the mind learns new patterns, that the unconscious becomes responsive to conscious direction, and that the effortless ability to act with clarity and intention gradually replaces reactive chaos. Consistency builds confidence. Each repeated action, each deliberate pause, each conscious choice reinforces the understanding that mastery is possible. When the mind experiences repeated success in observing itself, regulating attention, and responding rather than reacting, a quiet certainty develops. This confidence is not arrogant or loud. It is a steady, internal assurance that the mind can be directed, that presence can be maintained, and that the self is not at the mercy of random impulses. Confidence grows in proportion to consistent practice, and this confidence becomes a foundation upon which further mastery is built. The principle of consistency applies not only to internal observation, but also to every aspect of life. Habits, routines, and deliberate practices compound over time. Reading one page each day, taking one breath with awareness, observing one thought without attachment, these small acts, repeated over months and years, accumulate into profound transformation. The mind learns through repetition. Neural pathways are reinforced, old patterns weaken, and new patterns become automatic. Consistency is the vehicle through which awareness, clarity, emotional regulation, and presence are woven into the fabric of life. Without it, insight remains theoretical. With it, insight becomes lived reality. Consistency also strengthens resilience. The mind faces constant challenges, distractions, and setbacks. Even when awareness is cultivated, attention wavers, habits reassert themselves, and old patterns attempt to regain control. Without consistent effort, mastery falters at the first obstacle. With consistency, setbacks become opportunities for reinforcement rather than reasons for surrender. Each moment of returning attention to the present, each pause to notice thought, each effort to act deliberately is a rehearsal in the practice of mastery. Repetition teaches endurance, patience, and the quiet understanding that mastery is a lifelong process rather than a singular achievement. Another dimension of consistency is its impact on emotional life. Emotional regulation is not an instantaneous skill. It is the result of repeated practice in directing attention, observing thought, and choosing response. Each time a moment of frustration, fear, or distraction is met with awareness and deliberate focus, emotional strength grows. The mind learns that reactions are optional, that calm is possible even amid chaos, and that attention can be guided consciously. Over time, repeated practice transforms emotional patterns, creating stability, balance, and inner peace. Consistency is the hidden architect of this transformation, quietly reshaping the mind's responses until mastery becomes habitual. Consistency also cultivates insight. When awareness is applied repeatedly, patterns emerge. Thoughts, emotions, and behaviors which once seemed chaotic or overwhelming begin to reveal their underlying structure. The mind becomes a landscape that can be mapped, understood, and navigated with skill. This insight is not a one-time revelation. It is the cumulative effect of thousands of small, deliberate acts of noticing, reflection, and correction. Each moment of attention, each pause to observe, Each choice to act consciously adds to this growing understanding. Mastery is therefore less about sudden genius and more about patient accumulation of insight through repetition. Furthermore, consistency is intimately connected with discipline. Discipline is not restriction, it is the steady application of attention and effort toward what matters. Consistent practice strengthens the mind's capacity to resist distraction, to remain anchored in presence, and to prioritize what is meaningful over what is trivial. Discipline and consistency work together. Discipline creates the framework for repetition, and repetition reinforces discipline. Through this interplay, the mind develops both strength and flexibility, strength in maintaining focus and presence, flexibility in responding skillfully to life's ever-changing circumstances. Consistency also fosters humility. The slow, patient work of mastery reveals that there is no instant achievement, no permanent state, no final arrival. Each day presents new challenges, new thoughts, new distractions, and the practice must continue. This recognition keeps the mind grounded, prevents arrogance, and maintains openness to growth. Humility and consistency together create a sustainable path toward mastery, where progress is measured not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in steady, cumulative growth. Ultimately, consistency builds mastery because it aligns action with intention over time. Awareness, focus, emotional regulation, presence, and insight are all temporary unless they are exercised repeatedly. Mastery is not an abstract goal, it is the lived result of consistent practice applied in the small moments of daily life. Each pause, each breath, each conscious act compounds invisibly, gradually reshaping the mind and creating a stable, powerful capacity to navigate life with clarity, calm, and skill. Mastery is therefore not a destination but a journey, and consistency is the vehicle that carries the traveler forward, moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath,